My name is Elsie Kincaid, 27 years old from Montgomery, Alabama. 17 years ago, my father vanished, my uncle died in a mysterious fire, and my mother made sure I never asked why. But when my dad walked into my café like a ghost with a warning, I realized everything I believed about my family was a lie. Before we dive into this twisted family secret, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more suspenseful stories every week, and stick around. This one will have you questioning who you can really trust. Let's begin. It was a Tuesday, slow, muggy, and uneventful. The kind of Alabama afternoon where the ceiling fans felt like they were spinning just to keep time. Not cool anything. I was behind the counter at the Hollow Bean, my cafe tucked off Dexter Avenue in downtown Montgomery. Same playlist humming. Same regulars murmuring into laptops and cappuccinos. Everything felt safe in its predictability, until the bell over the door jingled and in walked the ghost of my past. He looked older, sure. Grayer. Slower in the shoulders. But I'd know that face anywhere. The scar beneath the left eye. The way he scanned the room like he'd memorized every exit. And those eyes, steel blue, and full of the kind of silence you don't unlearn. "Hi, Elsie," he said, voice like gravel and regret. "You look just like your mom." My heart stopped. Or maybe it raced. I couldn't tell which. 17 years of nothing. Not a call. Not a letter. Not a death certificate. Nothing but the echo of the front door slamming that summer morning when I was 13. Mom told me not to wait for him. "Some men break, Elsie," she said. "And some never bothered to fix what they shattered." Now here he was, alive and unannounced, standing in front of the pastry case like he just needed caffeine and not absolution. "What do you want?" I managed, my hands gripping the counter hard enough to ache. He glanced around. "A coffee. Black." The gall, I turned, started the pour. My fingers trembled, but I didn't let it show. I wouldn't give him that. Not yet. When I handed over the cup, he didn't reach for it. He looked at me, really looked. As if I were something he hadn't expected to survive without him. "I didn't come here to hurt you," he said quietly. "I came because it's time you knew the truth." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the truth about why you left your wife and daughter with no warning and no money?" His jaw tightened, just slightly. "It's not what you think. It never was." I crossed my arms. "Then say it." He hesitated. "Then, not here." "Of course not. Because this was my world now. And he didn't belong in it." He slid a card across the counter. On it, just an address. Oakwood Cemetery. My laugh was hollow. "You've got jokes." But he didn't smile. "Tomorrow. Noon. I'll be by Caleb's grave." And just like that, he turned and left, the bell chiming behind him like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I never got to finish. I stood there long after he disappeared into the street, the coffee going cold on the counter. My father was alive. And apparently, so was a truth I didn't ask for, but something in his eyes stuck with me, like a splinter I couldn't dig out, the kind that festers, the kind that demands to be followed. Oakwood Cemetery wasn't quiet like I remembered it. The cicadas screeched like static, and the heavy summer air wrapped around me like sweat-soaked linen. Every step I took felt like trespassing on something sacred, and maybe I was. Victor stood beneath a sycamore tree near the older section, his back turned, facing a headstone I hadn't visited since I was a child. Caleb Kincaid. Beloved brother. Taken too soon. 1971 to 2006. When he heard my footsteps, he didn't turn. Just said, "Thanks for coming." I didn't answer. I stood several feet away, arms crossed, heart pounding. Everything about this was wrong. Seeing him. Being here. Facing a past I'd buried deeper than this whole cemetery. He finally turned. The lines on his face were deeper in the daylight, like years had carved him hollow. "You're angry." "You should be," he said, "you have no idea." Victor nodded slowly, then motioned to the gravestone. "You remember him?" I shrugged. Barely. Uncle Caleb died when I was 8. Fire, right? He looked down. That's what the papers said. Something about the way he said it made the air shift. What do you mean? I asked. He exhaled through his nose, the way people do when they're carrying something heavy. Your mother and Caleb. They weren't just close, Elsie. They were involved. I blinked. You're saying Mom had an affair? With my brother, he said bluntly. I found out a week before I left. The world tilted. No, I said. That's not possible. Mom wouldn't, she would. And she did. His voice cracked. She told me to leave. Said if I didn't disappear, she'd destroy me. Take everything. Make me the villain. Said nobody would believe me anyway. And you know what? She was right. I stared at him, mouth dry. And you just left? Walked away from me? I tried to fight her, Elsie, he said. Stepping closer. But she owned the narrative. Owned the bank accounts. The lawyers. She made sure I'd be erased from your life. You think I wanted to disappear? You were everything to me. I shook my head, fighting the tears clawing at the back of my throat. And Caleb? I asked, voice shaking. What happened to him? Victor hesitated. Then, he was going to confess. To you. To me. He wrote a letter. But he died in a house fire before it ever got mailed. I staggered backward like I'd been slapped. You think Mom? I don't have proof, he said. But I know her. And if she could cut me out of your life like I was nothing, what do you think she'd do to the man who could expose her? A gust of hot wind swept through the trees. The silence between us stretched. Victor pulled something from his jacket, a photocopy of an envelope. Caleb's handwriting. My name on the front. I found this 2 years ago, hidden in storage. The letter was missing. But it proves one thing. I looked at him, my voice barely audible. She lied. I didn't sleep that night. Victor's words kept echoing in my head like a loose shutter banging in a storm. She was involved with Caleb. She made me disappear. He was going to confess. None of it could be true, could it? But the worst part was, I wasn't sure anymore. By morning, I found myself standing in front of the old Kincaid house on Mulberry Street, where Mom still lived. I told myself I was just visiting. Told her I needed to grab a few things from the attic. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't stop me. Maybe she thought I was just rattled from Victor showing up. She had no idea I was looking for proof. The attic was just as I remembered, dusty, dim, the kind of place childhood nightmares were born. Boxes labeled baby clothes, photos, and estate. Caleb lined the far wall. My hand shook as I opened the one marked with my uncle's name. Inside were newspaper clippings, condolence cards, an old watch. And at the very bottom, a wooden keepsake box. I remembered it vaguely from years ago, tucked under Caleb's nightstand. It was locked, but brittle with age. I pried it open with a rusted screwdriver and found exactly what I didn't know I was hoping for, a leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed, stained in some places. But the handwriting was unmistakably his, tight, angled, a little impatient. I flipped through quickly at first. July 4th, Lila says she'll handle it. But she doesn't understand what Victor is capable of. July 9th, she called me at midnight. Said it's over. But it's not. She's scared. I'm scared. July 12th, if anything happens to me, look to Lila. I froze. Read that last line again. And again. The air felt colder. Despite the attic's stifling heat, Caleb wasn't just having an affair, he was afraid. And he knew something. Something dangerous enough that he'd leave a warning in ink. I read on. Victor's gone. Lila said she took care of it. But something's off. She's acting like none of this matters now. Like I'm disposable. I don't know who to trust anymore. I tried writing to Elsie, but Lila took the letter before I could send it. My breath caught. Victor was telling the truth. The letter was real. The affair was real. And Lila had controlled the whole narrative, just like he said. Suddenly, I wasn't just haunted, I was furious. Everything I thought I knew about my family was unraveling. My mother didn't just erase Victor from our lives. She buried Caleb, maybe metaphorically, maybe literally, and now I was standing in the middle of her lies. I tucked the journal into my bag and closed the box. My hands were still shaking. If she'd gone this far to keep the truth buried, what else had she been willing to do? The fire happened in 2006, but you'd think it was a century ago with how little anyone wanted to talk about it. Uncle Caleb's death had always been described in soft, sympathetic tones, a tragic electrical fire in his rental house on Madison Avenue. No survivors. Nothing suspicious. Just a man alone in a creaky old place with faulty wiring and bad luck. But now, with Caleb's journal in my bag and a sick feeling lodged in my chest, I knew I had to dig deeper. I started with the Montgomery Fire Department. The receptionist was polite until I asked about the 2006 Madison Avenue fire. Her smile faded like someone had turned down a light. That one's sealed, she said. You'd need to go through official channels. I pushed. Said I was a family member. That I was doing personal research. She didn't budge, so I went to the next best source, the people who never forget anything. Caleb's old neighbor, Miss Arletta, still lived across the street in the same white-paneled house with the chipped shutters. I knocked on her door, expecting hesitation. But when I said Caleb's name, her eyes went sharp and alert. He didn't light that fire, she said before I even asked. My breath caught. I told the police what I saw, she continued. Your mother was there that night. Parked up the street. I remember because I waved to her. She didn't wave back. Just sat in her car watching the house. 10 minutes later, smoke started pouring out the windows. Did you tell the fire investigators? I asked. She nodded. A young man came by. Took notes. Promised to look into it. But I never heard from him again. I thanked her, barely holding in the storm rising in my throat. Back at home, I took a risk and called an old friend from college. Tasha, who worked in county records. She owed me a favor. After some hushed phone shuffling and the quiet click of keys, she sent me what she called a redacted incident file. Most of the report was blacked out, but one page stood out. A handwritten investigator's note, half-faded but legible, unconfirmed report of black SUV seen parked nearby prior to fire. Potential witness claims occupant resembled Lila Kincaid. Follow-up postponed pending internal review, postponed. Not closed. Not cleared, postponed. I stared at my mother's name scrawled in blue ink. There it was, proof she was there. Not days before. Not earlier that week. That night, the embers weren't just metaphorical. They were real. Smoldering under lies that never cooled, my mother hadn't just erased Victor. She'd stalked Caleb. Silenced him. And whatever guilt she had, she'd buried beneath monograms, charity luncheons, and white wine smiles. But now, I had fire of my own, and I wasn't going to let it go out. I never wanted a piece of Kincaid Interiors. As a teenager, I'd spent summer sorting fabric swatches and answering phones in the showroom on Court Street, but even then I knew the business was my mother's true child. She nurtured it more than she ever nurtured me, polished its image, fed its reputation, and spoke about the brand with more warmth than she ever gave my name. But now I saw it differently, not as a business, as a crime scene. I started digging. Not on the showroom floor where everything gleamed, but in the paperwork. The files that went back to the mid-2000s, just before Caleb's death. I asked Tasha to help me pull property filings, business licenses, and ownership records. It took a week, but when I laid it all out across my living room floor, a story began to take shape. A month after Caleb died, Kincaid Interiors quietly filed a change of ownership, transferring his share of the business to a silent partner. The signature on the document read E. Kincaid. My name. I was 10 years old at the time. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't sign this, Tasha confirmed it. The signature didn't match any of the others on file. Not my old school forms. Not my driver's license. Someone forged my name, most likely Lila. And by doing so, she absorbed Caleb's portion of the business under the guise of keeping it in the family. But there was more. Buried in an expense report from 2007 was a single, unexplained payout labeled Consultation, S. Ferris. The same name popped up again in a ledger for 2010, under a vague category, Special Services. I found him eventually, Stephen Ferris. A private investigator turned crisis manager with a reputation for making inconvenient evidence disappear. The same man listed as a contact in Caleb's fire investigation file, and suddenly, everything snapped into place. My mother didn't just cover up the past, she monetized it. Used my name, forged my signature, and made me a silent accomplice in whatever shady deal followed Caleb's death. She cut Victor out of the picture and wrote her own ending to the family story. One where she stood tall, poised, unchallenged. I wasn't just her daughter. I was her shield, but not anymore. I took photos of everything, documents, payouts, signatures. Made backups. Hid flash drives in 3 separate locations. If my mother could build an empire off forged names and hushed tragedies, I could dismantle it, one lie at a time, but I had to be careful, because now, she wasn't just a controlling parent, she was a woman with everything to lose, and people like that, they're the most dangerous kind of all. Victor met me at an abandoned park bench near Riverfront Park, tucked behind a row of rusted lampposts and crumbling bricks. It was early evening, cicadas humming, and the air smelled like jasmine and old water. He didn't say anything at first. Just handed me a plastic sleeve with an aged envelope inside. My name, Elsie, was scrawled across the front in Caleb's unmistakable handwriting. There was no stamp. No address. Just a faded postmark in the corner, July 13, 2006, the day before the fire. My stomach dropped. Victor's voice was low. I found it in a box of your uncle's things. Buried deep. The letter inside was missing, but the envelope was with some of Caleb's notes. Stuff your mother never meant for anyone to see. I stared at the envelope like it might breathe if I looked away. He wrote to me, I whispered. He tried to tell me something. Victor nodded. I think he meant to deliver it himself. Or maybe mail it. But I believe someone got to it first. I didn't need to ask who, the timing. The secrecy. The absence of the letter, my mother, she must have found it, intercepted it, just like she intercepted everything that didn't fit her narrative. If Caleb was going to confess, to tell me the truth about the affair, about Victor, about her betrayal, she couldn't let that happen, and if she was willing to erase Victor from my life, willing to forge signatures and buy off investigators, then maybe, just maybe, she was willing to silence Caleb permanently. I turned the envelope over, gently. The seal was ripped open, not torn by accident, but with intent. Someone had wanted what was inside. And they made sure it never reached me. I think Caleb knew, Victor said, watching me closely. That's why he left the note in his journal. If anything happens to me, look to Lila. I nodded, my voice shaky. He knew she'd come for him. Victor leaned forward. This letter. It could have changed everything. It could have stopped the fire, saved my reputation, kept our family from falling apart. I looked up at him. But it didn't. And that was the truth I couldn't unsee. The letter never came. The warning was lost. And for 17 years, I lived under my mother's carefully curated illusion, one where she was the victim, the survivor, the savior. Now I knew better. I folded the envelope back into the sleeve and slipped it into my bag, alongside Caleb's journal and the forged business documents. The weight of it all felt unbearable. Victor stood to leave, but before he turned, he said, "You're doing what Caleb couldn't. Be careful, Elsie. Lila's not just ruthless. She's desperate." I watched him disappear into the dusk, and in that moment, I knew, this wasn't about exposing the truth anymore, it was about surviving it. I didn't plan some grand showdown. No dramatic dinner or teary-eyed speech. I just walked into Kincaid Interiors one humid afternoon and told the receptionist I needed to see my mother. Lila Kincaid was seated in her glass-walled office, tapping her fountain pen against a fabric sample like it was a weapon. She looked up when I entered, cool and unbothered, as if the last few weeks hadn't shattered the entire myth she built around herself. "Elsie," she said smoothly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I closed the door behind me and dropped a thin folder onto her desk. She flipped it open with one manicured finger. Inside, a photocopy of Caleb's journal page, the sealed fire report, the forged transfer of ownership papers. And the envelope. The one Caleb wrote me. The one that never arrived. Her eyes flicked up. "Still no reaction. You want to tell me the truth now?" I asked, voice steady but raw. "Or should I start with what I know?" She closed the folder. Leaned back in her chair. Not surprised. Not afraid. Truth is a delicate thing, Elsie. Handled poorly, it becomes dangerous. My throat tightened. "So you admit it?" She smiled faintly. "I admit nothing. But I admire the way you've pieced it all together." That sent a chill through me. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't confirming it either. She was circling it, like a vulture waiting for me to collapse under the weight of it. "You ruined Dad," I said. "You let Caleb burn. You stole my name and used it to take everything. And you came back," she said softly, "so hungry for answers that you couldn't see the trap you were walking into." I blinked. "What trap?" Lila stood, circled the desk, and stopped inches from me. Her perfume smelled like orchids and arsenic. "You think this is justice?" She whispered. "You think you're exposing me?" "No, darling. You're just setting fire to your own name. The business carries your signature. The accounts are under your authorization. You want to bring it down? You burn with it." I stepped back, breath shallow. "That's not true." "Oh, but it is," she said, almost kindly. "You're a Kincaid. That means you either protect the legacy, or you're next to be erased." That word, erased, sliced deeper than anything else she'd said. She wasn't warning me, she was threatening me. I turned to leave. My hand shook, but I didn't let her see it. As I opened the door, she called out, "You have until the end of the week. Elsie. Decide who you are. A daughter. Or an enemy." I walked out into the sun, feeling like I'd just escaped a cage that looked like a home, but I wasn't afraid anymore. She built her kingdom on ash and lies, and I had matches of my own. They say revenge is best served cold. But mine was methodical, strategic, and it burned with quiet fire. After that conversation with my mother, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I spent those hours poring over everything I'd collected: Caleb's journal, the fake signature documents, the sealed fire report, the old letter. But what mattered most now was what I did next. I needed power. Leverage. Victor helped me navigate the legal waters. Turned out, when Lila forged my name to gain control of Caleb's shares, she also unwittingly gave me authority she never intended. By claiming I was a partner back in 2006, she had filed paperwork listing me as a beneficiary of voting rights and asset access in the business. For once, her arrogance had overreached. Victor found a discreet attorney, someone outside Montgomery, with no ties to my mother's web of influence. Within days, I'd legally reclaimed my stake in Kincaid Interiors. Quietly, then I started pulling the thread. First, I contacted a financial auditor and leaked the hush payments to Stephen Ferris. Then I passed along the fire report, redacted and all, to a reporter at the Montgomery Sentinel under the condition of anonymity. I knew it wouldn't stay anonymous for long. That was part of the plan. I updated the company website, removing Lila's glowing biography and replacing it with a statement: Kincaid Interiors is undergoing a formal audit and internal restructuring to address legacy concerns. Clients began calling within hours. Lila didn't reach out until the second headline hit: local design firm under scrutiny for fraudulent records and cover UPS, when I walked into the office that Friday. Her eyes were sharp, her voice cold. "You think this ends well for you?" she hissed. I dropped a folder on her desk, copies of the documents I leaked. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning. I'm reclaiming what you tried to erase." She laughed bitterly. "You're just like your father. Righteous and naive. No, I said. I'm just like Caleb. But I lived. With that, I walked into the conference room and announced to the stunned staff that I was assuming temporary executive control while investigations proceeded. Half the employees nodded silently. The other half left. I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for loyalty, I was doing it for truth. Over the next week, I held press interviews, released statements, and cooperated fully with investigators. I made sure every move was documented, every quote careful. I wanted the world to know, I wasn't covering up my family's mess, I was cleaning it. Lila vanished from public view. No statements. No denials. Just silence, and when I stood on the front steps of the business we once shared, facing reporters and flashbulbs, I felt something I hadn't in years. Control. This wasn't just a takeover, it was a reckoning. The showroom smelled like dust and lavender, like something beautiful that had started to rot. Kincaid Interiors was officially closed. The last of the boxes had been carted out that morning. The phones no longer rang. The custom chairs and imported rugs were gone, replaced by silence that echoed off the marble floors. I stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by nothing, and still felt the weight of too much. Lila's empire had crumbled exactly how she feared it would, not in one dramatic implosion, but piece by piece. The clients who once toasted her with champagne and bragged about being Kincaid designed were the first to jump ship. Then came the investors, men who vanished from public record with stunning efficiency. Even the family lawyer, the one who stood by us through every gala and glossy magazine spread, had quietly retired 2 weeks after the audit findings went public. No one wanted to be tied to the fall. Victor called me almost daily now. He wanted to rebuild. Reconnect. Forgive, but I wasn't the girl he left behind. I'd carried too much truth since that envelope passed through my hands. Too many nights spent dissecting what was real and what was crafted. I couldn't go back to a father-daughter lunch like it was all a misunderstanding. I met him once more, under the same tree in Oakwood Cemetery. I thanked him for the truth. Told him I was glad he came back. Then I walked away. Some relationships belong to the past, and as for Lila? She never gave a public statement. No press conference. No rebuttal. She didn't fight, she vanished. The last I heard, she left for New Orleans. No forwarding address. No final word. She understood the power of silence. She used it her whole life to control the story, but now, I wielded it, and it spoke louder than anything I could scream. I walked to the back wall of the empty showroom, where a large mirror still hung, the only thing left unclaimed. It was antique, oval, rimmed in hand-carved wood. I used to press my face to it as a kid, pretending to be older, important, beautiful. Now I saw someone else entirely, my hair pulled back, dark circles under my eyes, a small scar on my chin I hadn't noticed before. But behind all of that, something harder. Sharper. Like truth shaped me into something steel-forged. I wasn't here for vengeance anymore, I was here to outlive it. Justice hadn't come in the form of fire or fury. No grand explosion. No dramatic downfall, it came like frost. Slow, quiet, irreversible, and when the world stopped talking about the Kincaid name, that's when I finally knew, she was gone, and I was free. Thanks for listening to my story. If family secrets, betrayal, and suspense are your kind of drama, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more twisted tales every week, and drop a comment below. Would you have exposed the truth? Or walked away? Let's talk in the comments.